This will be the first time ever that somebody has been able to watch whitetail deer at this level.
What patterns did you see in mature buck bedding in the Ozarks?
Over 150 variables per deer per day that I was studying.
Some of the common myths, around October, November deer hunting and what some of the research is showing to be either true or not true.
Finding these terrain-driven locations and hunting on those, if you're able to repeat that process multiple times throughout the season, you're going to start having success pretty quickly.
What has been the thing that you've been like, I've made a connection that I didn't know before?
Yeah, the number one thing is...
Welcome back to the Ozark podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Veet, joined as always by co-host of the show and my good buddy, Mr. Kyle Plunkett.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
Man, I'm good. We had a rainy drive up here, made it a couple hours from home, and we're currently sitting in the Ozarker Lodge.
Yeah, we're at the Ozarker. This is a cool place. It's been a place that I've been wanting to come for a while. They've been nice enough to host us, and
yeah, we're excited to be here. It's neat. It's a cool vibe. Seems like a fun place we'd take our families, let our kids run around, and seems like a cool base camp for some outdoor adventures. And we're gonna host a podcast here, so yeah, let's dive into it.
Yeah, we've got a very special guest with us for this episode, and if you are into hunting, into YouTube, into learning about whitetail, you're probably going to be excited about our guest because our guest is kind of new to the internet world, the YouTube world, but you have blown up, it seems like, in just a matter of months. And I know you've been putting in a ton of work, and a lot of that work people are just now starting to see, so it's not like you just started doing this stuff. But we have with us Derrick Dixon of Whitetail Research.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for joining.
So Derrick, you have basically, to set the stage, if you guys don't know Derrick or his channel, Whitetail Research, really, I just heard about it a couple months ago. Somebody sent it to me. Was like, this guy, he's gonna blow up. Like, that was the first thing that I heard. Someone sent me a link, and they're like, this guy's gonna blow up. Like, this is his first video, but it's awesome. And you've been doing drone research on whitetails. And you took an entire hunting season off last year, and you just documented all of your stuff. You've been doing research, collecting data, learning as much as you can, and diving into it, giving insights that people have really never seen or been able to capture with the way that we collect data in the past.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that I wasn't expecting to, going into it with the idea initially. I knew that it was it's one of those topics that could just explode all of a sudden, but I didn't think it was going to move this quickly. Now, I figured it would take quite a while. And I remember whenever I first posted the video, it had been live for 6 hours for the first video. And by the end at 10 p.m. or 10:30 p.m., I was laying down with my wife, and it was channel had 12 subscribers or something. And then video had 90 something views. And I knew every person that viewed it. And I was kind of like, really, you guys didn't subscribe to me? But it was fine. And then I remember laying down next to her, and I was just like, you know what? I think this YouTube thing is going to be a little harder than I thought. I wasn't ready for that. And then I sat back, and I had a moment where me and her prayed, and we prayed that if just 10 hunters can find this video, just 10, then it's gonna do something special. And went to sleep, woke up the next morning, 10 comments from hunters that very next morning.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
It was
cool.
My goodness.
Yeah.
And I ran into the bedroom. She was still asleep, and I jumped on the bed, and I was showing her the 10 comments. It had 400 views. And by the end of that day, it was 20-something thousand views. And it was oh my goodness, it's actually doing something. I mean, it was unreal.
That's
crazy.
really neat.
So cool. I think it's good. Going into it, you've got the mindset of this is going to take a lot of work. This is not going to happen overnight, blah, blah, blah. And then for it to actually, in some ways, happen, not overnight, but just to have the immediate success, it's so much, I don't know, so much better. You're oh, maybe I won't have to just grind so hard to get 1,000 views.
Yeah, well, it definitely felt like it was overnight because I'd been working on it since June of 2024. So there was a year where it was just me and a drone, and a lot of people kind of thinking oh, this guy's a little crazy.
What's Derrick up to?
Derrick's not working a job. Derrick's just flying a drone every day, watching deer.
Oh,
this,
man.
Yeah, this is kind of weird. And then, all of a sudden you post the video, and then it just turns on, and it was just overnight. Everybody kind of knew me really quickly in the hunting industry, and it was definitely weird.
Yeah.
So, but no, it was amazing.
Yeah,
it was awesome.
I can imagine those conversations with buddies who are what are you up to now? It's well,
your parents.
Every day I put on a pair of boots and a pair of jeans, and I grab my drone and I go out to the woods, and for most of the population, you're thinking, what?
What?
But I have a vision. I have a plan.
Yes.
Man, it's working.
Were your in-laws like, sweetheart, who'd you marry? Who's this guy?
Over 90% of the people that were like in my family, they all thought I was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
One of the main people that was actually on my side was my dad. He kind of knew like, okay, he's not crazy. Like he has a really, really cool idea.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't, he knew that I wouldn't be this excited about it if it wasn't going to be something groundbreaking. And
Right.
like I just kept hammering the idea that like this will be the first time ever in the history of man that somebody has been able to watch whitetail deer at this level.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know there's a lot of things you can dive into ethicalities of it and all this type of stuff. And I have strong feelings on it. But regardless, it's like, this is amazing what I'm going to be able to do. And especially at the level that I'm trying to take it to in terms of the videography and the voiceovers and the storytelling and this type of stuff.
The research.
And and the research and the documentation of it and how much stuff I was actually documenting. Over 150 variables per deer per day that I was studying.
Dude.
And it was a lot of work, but
Yeah.
it definitely
man.
felt like a kind of peak run right whenever I posted.
And I feel like, it's paying off. And I know that like you've got a long runway and already like you're doing a ton. You've been on a podcast tour like for the last couple of months, I know. And what all podcasts have you been on lately?
The most recent ones I can think of are like Vortex, Hunt XP. I wish I could remember everybody's name, but
I know you're with the guys down in Alabama, the Southern
Outdoorsman guys. The first one I did was the Hunting Public, and I actually made a lot of people that had contacted me initially wait until I did the Hunting Publics, just because they're one of my favorite YouTube channels, and I've always admired those guys. And to have the opportunity to be able to do their podcast initially, I was just kind of like, I'm going to make everybody wait. I'll do theirs, and then I'll do everybody else's. And after that, I did Bo Martonic, I don't know, you name it, a lot of places. Wired to Hunt for Meat Eater.
Yeah.
A lot of pretty cool ones.
That's cool, man. You've been, like right away, like getting connected with some of the best people in the industry. And it's cool. What I didn't realize and what I haven't said yet was I was watching your videos like very early on, and I didn't realize until you actually reached out to us that you were in the Ozarks.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is really cool. This guy's doing all this research. And I just had no idea. Like I knew it was hill country. And I don't think maybe I had connected or I hadn't heard exactly like where you're at in the first or second video.
And I actually never mentioned it just because initially I was kind of worried like, well, people are going to find the areas I'm flying and then this, that, and the other, and dirt road hunters, and I don't know, all the ethicalities of it. And then people just in general observing a property and learning it too well. And if they hunt that property already existingly, then I'm kind of showing them everything that's happening on that property and kind of spoiling the hunting experience there if they watch the videos. And so I've gone through quite a few loops to ensure that everything's confidential in that. Mm-hmm. So if I do research on a property that's not, like say I do a research on a property over here, then I will mimic what's happening on this property on a different property and just make it look. So a lot of the stuff that's already been on YouTube, that's been on my family's property, a lot of it actually hasn't taken place. Some of it hasn't. I'd say 50-50 right now. Some of it has, some of it hasn't. But and that's going to continue to be the way that is. So if I do research on a property in Branson, then who says if I'm going to mimic that? I could be mimicking on a piece of public land from Michigan or something.
Yeah,
something that just the terrain looks similar in that situation. And it takes me a while to find similar enough terrain to be able to mimic that. But that's something that I've been doing.
Okay, smart.
Yeah.
I didn't I didn't understand that hunters like that existed where they could go in on YouTube and find exactly where somebody is showing to then try to hunt it. Until I was watching, you'd mentioned them, the Hunting Public guys were showing on X maps, but then they'd say this is a similar setup or whatever. It's not the real map. We're not going to actually pull up our onX because I guess people would find it and say I'm going to find the same terrain features and go hunt the same spot.
Well, and especially in my case where I'm not hunting these deer, so there's no hunting pressure for my situation specifically on these deer, and I can find a deer that's 150, 170 inches, and then I post a video of them. And then I showed the terrain features. And if I leave like the river that's running through the property or the creek, then all you have to do is plug in that creek. And then it's like, okay, there it is. It's a topography feature. And maybe there's other ways you might be able to take a screenshot, throw it in Chat GPT and be like, figure this out.
Find the topo lines.
I think it'd be pretty difficult too. So
yeah, that's crazy. It's smart. It's things that and we're going to talk about more about this, like technology, probably on the second episode that we do, part 2, diving into like as technology advances, where do you draw the line on the ethics of using technology? Should fair chase evolve with technology advancements and all things like that? So we'll go there. But to start, I think I would just love to, being that you are a son of the Ozarks, you're a local guy. We all hunt similar type terrain here in the hill country. I feel like we get like an inside scoop with you talking about just the Ozarks. I just kind of want to like zoom out and like overall all the research that you've done. Like, what do you feel like has been some of the best insights you've drawn out? Like if you had to pick one, kind of stepping back and looking at your body of work right now, what has been the thing that you've been like, I've made a connection that like I didn't know before?
Yeah. I mean, there's quite a few. But initially, one of the first ones that always comes to mind is just that evening thermal switch idea where the deer get up on their feet. And the idea behind it is essentially you could just look at your weather app on your phone and you can see the temperature for the day. And whenever it peaks out and then it starts to drop, then there's something happening in the air and thermals are switching. I won't get into science behind it, but there's a lot of swirling effect that starts to take place in that time, especially in different areas. And there's a lot more to it, especially in our hill country world where sun's rising in the east and it starts heating east-facing slopes first, wraps around to the south, starts heating south-facing, west-facing, and there's swirling effects happening all day long, but especially whenever it starts to drop and that last period of time frame, for whatever reason, it's as if every mature buck just decides this is the time to stand up. And it falls into that same time frame where if you're out in the woods and you're just sitting in a tree stand and then all of a sudden everything gets dead. Everything's quiet, and you can start hearing the bugs chirping and everything. That little eerie feel, and as a hunter, you start getting a tick in the back of your brain, like, okay, like if you weren't focusing before, now we need to focus. Well, same thing for them. That's that same time frame. Whenever I'm seeing them stand up within a 5 to 15 minute variance in the evening time frame, very, very consistently. And sometimes it's a little earlier if the temperature decides to drop off. Sometimes it's a little bit later, but for the most part, it was always happening very consistently with that temperature fluctuation. And that was one fascinating thing.
I remember on one of your videos, you were seeing that, and like you saw on the same day or the same moment, 3 or 4 different mature whitetails stand up within like 4 minutes of each other.
Yeah.
Or I think that was in one of your first videos.
Yeah, and one of the things about it is that just because they stand up doesn't mean that they're standing up and then they just immediately take off. And in a lot of cases, actually most cases, whenever they stand up, they just kind of stand around,
kind of mosey.
spin around, mosey, make a rub over here, make a scrape over here, ruminate over here for a while. Like they're just hanging around, and then all of a sudden, clicks in their head and they take off in a different direction.
Yeah,
and that's that part is the part that's been extremely difficult to try to understand in terms of like where are you going and why are you going there? And I haven't drawn a line as to why they do what they're doing.
Yeah,
because it just seems so random. And and that may just be the answer. That it truly
is
just
they're a wild animal.
Yeah, they're a wild animal. It's just it's extremely random. No matter the wind direction or the pressure and all this and the other, moon phase, like everything, you compile it all, and there's so many variables every single day, and the weather conditions are different. No matter what happens, it just seems like it. To me, so far, it just seems random.
Yeah.
But the one thing about it that's not random is the way that they travel the terrain whenever they're walking. And this was kind of the second thing that I really liked, where if you found a kind of a group of does and they're walking vertical lines up and down between, maybe it's a food plot at the top of the ridge or whatever's taking place, but oftentimes they don't kind of meander a whole lot. They're walking pretty vertical lines. You can find these trails in the woods if you just walk out, and you're going to find these beaten down trails on ridge systems, and oftentimes those are going to be doe trails.
Yep.
And mature bucks, 99% of the time, whenever they're traveling through the woods, they're intersecting those trails all over the place. They're not wrapping downwind of doe bedding areas. They're not wrapping downwind of feeding areas. None of that. They're walking, intersecting trails every step of the way, and they have their nose to the ground all the time. They're constantly collecting scent as they go. And whenever they hit a spot where it's like, whoa, like potential doe and estrus or something that piques their interest, they stop. And then they'll kind of look off in a different direction. And if it was a doe that's potentially an estrus, he'll hook off of that trail that he was walking and he'll head in the direction of these does. And then all of a sudden you'll be, you'll flip back to the thermal camera and it's your mature buck that you're watching, and he's standing a few yards, 30 yards or so behind a group of does. It's like, wow, you found them pretty efficiently. That's pretty cool. And he'll be sitting there and kind of looking and checking them out from 30, 40 yards away. And then he'll put his head back to the ground. He'll be scent checking all over the place. He doesn't walk right up to her in the first place. Initially, he stays back and he's just scent checking the ground the entire time. And if that doe is potentially an estrus, that's whenever he'll move in and start kind of dogging her. But if not, he'll just hook back to his trail and continue walking on. And I've seen that a lot.
It makes so much sense. It also makes sense why my granddad used to tell me not to sit right at a doe trail to where the shot would be if the doe trail's coming at you or across you, because the buck's going to go across them the other way.
Yeah.
It's like just old mountain knowledge of if you don't just sit right there, because they're probably not just going to walk right down the trail. They're going to come across all of them in the multiple trails. Yeah. That's why your does come in this way and you see your bucks all going around that way.
Yeah.
Man, that's so good.
I think it's also fascinating seeing like what you're doing and how in a lot of like even collared research where before drones, like that would have been the best intel that we had. Like you would not have been able to tell that a buck stood up, moseyed around, stayed there for a while, bedded back down, waited for the winds. Well, like all of the stuff that you're doing and can actually visually see on the like with the drone happening in front of you in real time. It's I think it's taken things to another level of literally seeing what they're doing in the moment and collecting all the data that you're collecting.
Yeah, well, and if you look at GPS color studies, a lot of times you'll see kind of in their bedding area, it's just this like mass cluster of pins that are dropped in a location. It's like, well, he's bedding here. And so, but you don't really know what's kind of like you said, you don't know what's taking place inside of there. And that's one of the more fascinating things to observe what they're doing when they're bedding and how they sleep and how attentive they are at certain times of the day. And then if a doe moves by and she's, say it's November 1st or something, and a doe moves by, then oftentimes he'll stand up and he'll walk in that direction, even if it's 50 to 150 yards, because he'll see something kind of off in the distance. And once again, versus wrapping downwind or walking right up it to her, he'll walk right to where he's seen, her make her trail, scent check the trail, and then he'll just walk over and bed back down. And then another really cool thing to observe is wind shifting and deer, shifting based off of wind. And I have a whole, the wind is really difficult to understand as well, because I don't think wind plays near the role that anybody has ever thought, especially like in bedding locations. So like there's the one belief that bucks always bed on the leeward side of the ridge.
Yeah.
That was a really easy one to enter into the season and start researching.
Yeah.
And within a few weeks, I automatically determined is like, okay, that's not a thing.
Is it a majority of the time that is true, but it's like 51%, or is it like?
Yeah. I mean, I could look back at the percentages, but it's once again, it's just one of those random things. Like you can fly on the same day, and in some situations, there's bucks on the leeward ridge. There's some kind of on the side. There's some on the windward. Like there was just no connection point as to why they were in a certain area over another.
What about mature bucks? Like, and I know a lot of your research has been focused around mature bucks. Like, and you saw the same.
Yeah, no, same exact thing. Yeah, oftentimes I wasn't documenting where. I mean, I would drop a pin if I was needing to, but oftentimes I was only really paying attention to mature bucks.
Okay.
And over the course of the last season, I observed 44 different mature bucks across different properties.
Okay.
But
it's a pretty good sample size.
Yeah. It's really nothing compared to a GPS color study, that's kind of the simplicity of that is you just go out, color them, and you walk away and hands off, and then you wait for the data to come back. Whereas I have to constantly go out and observe every single time and try to pull data out of that event. And if my drone's not in the sky watching what's taking place, then I don't know what's going on. Like I have to have the drone in the sky, or I will not know what's taking place at that moment in time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think before we ask some more questions, we haven't clarified exactly what it is that you're doing. So
okay.
You have a channel. Yeah. It's gathering research, but you've mentioned drones, dropping pins, all of that. What's your process?
Yeah. So essentially, what I do and what I've done from the beginning is I have a thermal drone. First off, and that thermal drone has a 200x zoom camera. That makes it sound cooler than it is. Really, it's a 18x optical zoom, and then everything else to 200 is digital. So it's 18x optical, which is clear video all the way to 18.
Grainy.
Not grainy, exactly. And but anyways, essentially, I would take this drone, go out early in the morning, even if there's foliage on the trees. Like right now, I can still find a deer. Go out around 5:30 to 6 a.m. Locate mature bucks across the property. And in a situation like right now, I'm not able to ID those bucks oftentimes right whenever I find those hot spots. So I'm flying around and I'm looking for something that looks like, at this point, I've gotten pretty good at IDing like a buck bedding location. Like if I find a hot spot and it's a cluster of 3 to 4 hot spots, it's like those are does bedding. And if you find a cluster of kind of like 1, and sometimes if you find 2, especially right now, then it might be a buck that has a doe locked down. But I go and I drop pins on those locations. The drone has a rangefinder built onto it, and what it does is it takes where you're flying in the actual location that you're at, and then it takes the height at which you're flying, and then it sends that rangefinder out, that laser, and then whenever it bounces back, it does a big old math formula, and then it drops a pin, coordinates as to where that location was. So it's extremely accurate every single time whenever you drop these pins, barring that you're not hitting like a leaf on a tree or something. Then but for the most part, if you're paying attention, you can be really accurate. So go out in the morning, locate all these locations or all these bucks, potential bucks, drop pins on them, and then as sun starts to come up, then I'll fly back and I'll ID them all, and I'll find my subject for that day. So if there's one particular buck that I've really been focusing on for a week, then I'll harp on him. If there's a new buck, then I might go and see what he's up to, etc. But that's kind of the hard part, is trying to figure out which one I'm going to follow that day. Oftentimes in the beginning, I was trying to stay as close to myself as possible just to maximize battery life and stuff like that. But I've started to kind of go a little bit further as time goes on. But basically, find the deer. In most cases, you're going to find his bedding area if you start that early. So, in this example for day in life of whitetail research, essentially find the deer, mark the pin, and then document what he's doing in that time. So if he was bedding in this instance, then I'll document that he was bedding, and he was bedding on these conditions. And there's around 20 to 25 conditions in that one little event that took place.
That would be like wind speed,
wind speed, wind direction, kind of where he was bedded, his general behavior, bedding in coordination to other deer in the area, bedding time, the amount of time that he was bedded, the actual timestamp at the end of it whenever he stood up. And then there's a lot of other little things to it as well. But I also documented any little kind of intricacies built inside of it. So if he, decided to stand up and spin around and bed back down, I documented it. Every little thing that I could think of, I was typing it in. And then as soon as he stood up, then that's timestamp. And then that starts the whole next 25 to whatever variables that I would document. And then I would document that across his entire time frame. And then whenever he bed back down, timestamp. You just keep repeating this process all day long and documenting all these variables. And then in the end, you start to kind of get, here's how long he bedded during daylight on that particular day. Here's his yards per hour that he was traveling. You can get a term that actually GPS Scholar Studies that came up with initially, net displacement. So his displacement from whenever he was bedded in the morning to whenever he was last seen at light. You can also create a displacement from whenever he was bedding in the morning to whenever he was bedding in the evening. You can create all these different displacements and see how far he was traveling. And then you have total yards traveled, yards per hour, if I hadn't said that one, to see yards per hour is kind of the standard in GPS Scholar Studies to see how fast one is traveling. Oftentimes it's 750 to 1250 yards per hour is very, very normal. And and just keep repeating that all the way across the board. And in a perfect world, you could document multiple bucks in one situation, but oftentimes you're really focusing on one a day.
Yeah.
So.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about, and I know you've talked about this a lot on other podcasts and things like that, but morning versus evening movement and kind of the like very consistent patterns that you found in bucks travel more in the morning and they're actually covering more ground. Talk to me a little bit about morning versus evening, like what you saw and why that matters for hunters.
Yeah, and I saw this last year, and I've seen it again so far this year.
It's repeating itself.
Probably right around, I'm going to talk about it actually in this next video, but right around whenever bucks start to split from bachelor groups, I start noticing morning activity starts ticking up pretty quickly. And especially whenever you add into the rotation of heat, so high heat going into October, mixed with acorns dropping, and all these other variables that are kind of taking place, it causes deer to be a lot more active in the morning. So if you have a day where it's 90 degrees outside and late in the evening, that last 30 minutes of light, that's whenever temps are finally going to drop for that day, then they're going to be active at the last 30 minutes of light because they cannot be active hardly at all, especially with them putting on this winter coat. They can't be active in 90 degree weather. 90 degrees is a new 110 degrees to them in with their new coat that they just put on. So they have to be active late in the evening, or they could simultaneously be active early in the morning whenever it was 60 degrees, 70 degrees, all the way into 9 a.m., 10 a.m. And oftentimes they are. They're active all the way into 9 or 10 a.m. in the morning as early as October 5th. I mean, I'm seeing it very, very consistently. And that same across the board. Oftentimes, especially once bachelor groups split all the way until the end of season, morning time is almost 4 times the amount of movement in daylight taking place than evening.
Yeah.
Which kind of puts to bed the myth of like, if you're doing early season hunting, don't go out in the morning.
Yeah.
And you hear those guys tout, just go out in the evening.
Yeah. So, I mean,
whatnot,
if you're
but-
hunting September 15th to like September 30th, then yeah, you're probably going to want to still focus on the evening. But there comes a time whenever your bachelor groups are splitting, testosterone is rising, velvet is shedding, everything is taking place, and they start to shift and acorns drop. Then that morning activity starts to ramp up a lot in comparison.
Yeah.
Whereas, in the early season, they're generally pretty much only active in the evening. They still are active in the morning, but most of the time it's just kind of like settled back in their bedding area, and they're just seems like they're retaining energy. They're very lazy in that time frame, but whenever everything starts ramping and testosterone's ramping and their gut microbiome is changing, then that's whenever everything takes place and morning activity starts to ramp up pretty hard.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
And how does that carry on through kind of the rest of the season?
Yeah, I mean, it pretty much stays the same in terms of morning activity. The only thing that you can cut out that doesn't there's no grounds that I can state for the rut, because the peak rut time frame for whatever your area, for whatever time it takes place in your area is completely random. I mean, it's just the craziest, most hectic. There's no conclusion to be drawn for it other than the fact that go sit in the woods, like find a really good spot where you're not going to be detected very often. It really, I mean, you can still sit in a pretty bad spot and do really well in the peak rut, as we've seen some hunters walk away with a pretty big buck whenever they're not that great of a hunter. And I mean, that's just kind of the logic of it. And these bucks, they're kind of acting like lunatics in that time frame. And there's no conclusion to be drawn during peak rut for your area. But outside of peak rut, morning activity is almost always 4 times greater every single time in terms of how far they're moving. And the one thing as well that I'm noticing about it that makes me like mornings versus evenings is evenings, it seems like they're very laid back. They made it to where they wanted to go to already. They've already made their long trek that morning. They've been out, they've made rubs and scrapes and chased does, and they've done all these things. And now it's like, all right, like let's sit back on the couch with some potato chips
at the end of the day.
Yeah, at the end of the day, and just chill out. Like we're done. But the morning, they're very, very active, and they're oftentimes making a very long, pretty linear trek, as straight as they possibly can, because they're traveling a very long route.
They're on a mission.
They're on a mission. Yeah, that's what I always say, is that they're on a mission. And the cool thing about us in hill country is their mission is terrain driven oftentimes. And that's whenever you can start to play it to your advantage, where if you can find these areas where deer have to travel and they're being forced to walk in, then even if your funnel's 400 yards wide, they have to walk through that 400 yard wide funnel. And finding these terrain driven locations and hunting on those whenever everything's kind of at your side with wind and thermals, et cetera, to where you're undetectable. And if you're able to repeat that process multiple times throughout the season, it's like you're going to start having success pretty quickly.
Yeah. That's where I think that, like, in some ways, a lot of that information is brand new and it's confirmed, but in some ways it's like it's just confirming what the old timers have been saying, like in every episode that you've heard before. Anytime you talk to the guy who's like killed big bucks every year hunting in the Ozark mountains, it's like it's just confirming the way that those guys use terrain, the way that they understand wind and thermals, but just like high travel corridors and ways that deer have to move through the landscape.
Yeah. And the amazing thing about it is, there's amazing hunters that are out there that have sat on podcasts just like this, and they've said very similar things in the past as to what I'm saying. But a lot of people, they just kind of watch it and it's like, well, that's your anecdotal evidence.
Right.
Like, that's like your own personal experience in your particular area. And like, that might, I've seen some crazy things. Like I've got some nocturnal bucks. I've got this, that, and the other that you don't deal with. So like, you don't understand my situation, old timer. And it's like, well, old timer is pretty accurate with what he's saying. But the problem is that you're just listening to him sit and speak, and you can't actually go out and visually see what he's saying, and because you haven't been in his shoes. And this kind of allows people to come along for that ride. And it's like, well, look, like with a thermal drone, like I'm literally showing you, there's no debate that can take place as to what I'd seen in this situation, because I'm just showing you what I observed. And I mean, to a sense, I have to take that data and all this information and everything I viewed with a mature buck and how he's interacted with things, and I have to kind of try to make sense of it. But for the most part, I mean, watch it yourself and make your own assumptions from it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure. It makes me think of guys that like we've interviewed before: Brad Harris, Drew Atkinson, Brian Slane. These guys, Rustin, these guys who hunt in the Ozarks, and they get it done year after year after year. and it stops being a coincidence.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it stops being hillbilly magic, and it starts being like, yeah, they're applying this science based off of their woodsmanship, and the data is now, it's like confirming everything that these guys have earned by putting boots in the woods.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, and they're using, you'd mentioned the terrain. They're using the terrain to their advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And you're actually saying it's a beautiful thing to have the terrain that forces you to use it to your advantage.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I think most hunters in the Ozarks would potentially say that the terrain is a disadvantage.
It's like a handicap. Yeah.
Or, you know, it's kind of the, you know, I grew up always being told, like, I mean, these aren't like Kansas deer.
Right.
Like, these deer,
Yeah.
they'll make you work.
And
it's like you get a good one and like you really did something. But it's always said with kind of a hint of like, but it'd be really sweet to go go hunt Kansas. You
Yeah,
know?
'cause it'd be
great
so
to go in
easy
a
or
big
whatever.
flat field with a bunch of, you know, corn
Well,
or soybeans
I think
or
the
whatever.
part about it
and-
is it really depends on what type of weapon you're bringing to the party.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go rifle hunt in Kansas, then all right, that's going to be a pretty easy hunt.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, go
And
out
this
class.
is, yeah, this is no
yeah.
shade on. I mean, it's just
No,
no
I
shade
know.
on Kansas and how I grew up. But
Yeah.
I like that you said it's actually an advantage because once you learn how the thermals work, how the deer use it, where they're going, why they want to be there, and you're able to start putting those pieces of the puzzle together, there's a chance the average hunter in the Ozarks can go from, well, let's not even say average, a bad hunter, first time, never done it in the woods kind of guy, hunter,
Mm-hmm.
with knowing that and learning it and applying it, can go from, it's my first time sitting in a tree, to consistently killing deer, if not mature
Yeah.
whitetail buck.
Yeah, or at
Like-
least just getting to see them.
Yeah,
I
we're
mean,
getting to
that's-
see them.
Being
I mean,
able
that-
to see
yeah,
them,
that-
yes.
That's
Yeah.
like one of the hardest things in general for a lot of people, just like actually physically seeing a mature buck and having that experience. And that was another cool thing about this was like a lot of people can kind of pull back on those stories. And I know I can for sure. Like those moments where you'd seen just a big mature buck, but,
Oh, yeah.
but you weren't able to kill him in that
Mhm.
situation. You saw him for like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. And you could probably sit here and tell like a 20-minute, 30-minute story just off of that one hunt that you had. And it's like, now imagine taking it back to where you're flying this silly drone in the sky and you're watching these mature bucks all day long.
Yeah.
Not for 1 or 2 minutes, all day long.
The whole day.
And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, the amount of stories that start getting like built up in your head off of
Yeah,
that. 'Cause
man.
it's like,
Mhm.
man, like these different things that you've seen, that they're very fascinating.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask you. I know you you hinted to it a little bit earlier about bedding and how, you know, historical knowledge has been mature bucks really only bed on the leeward side of the ridge. I'm just curious, like, what patterns, if any, did you see in mature buck bedding in the Ozarks?
Yeah, the number one thing is thermal hubs. And that doesn't have to be your picturesque. If you Google thermal hub and go to Google Images and start looking at these beautiful ones that people have drawn out on Onyx or something, it doesn't particularly have to be these. It can be really micro topographical features where there's just really small thermal hubs. But if you go into that location and you wait until late in the evening, you'll feel that pull. Everything start dropping in that area and kind of pulling up down at the bottom. And really, you know, you can have a situation where there's 3 ridges or 2 ridges and a couple drainages, and that's creating a micro thermal hub. But very consistently, they're bedding in these areas thermal hubs, just
Okay.
period.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter leeward side of the ridge. I mean, oftentimes it's leeward side of the ridge. Some other times it's windward side. Other times it's just kind of off on the side in the area. But the area, the example that I had that really just threw leeward side of the ridge later in the season was I was recording on a day. There was like 25, 30 mile per hour winds, maybe a little bit faster. And it was sleeting ice. It was absolutely disgusting. 5 degrees outside.
Just a nasty
Just a
day.
nasty day. And I was tracking my favorite buck, the mainframe 10 that I named Winter in my second video. And he was bedding, whenever he bedded down for his evening bed, he bedded on the windward side of the ridge, and he turned and he was facing the storm, north wind. And he's just bedding there. Ice is building up on his antlers as he's laying there. And I'm just looking at him like, what are you doing? Like, why are you not tucked off the leeward side of the ridge down in a drainage, like getting out of the weather? Why did he stop there? And one of the initial thing that I thought as to why he could have stopped there is because he was just flat out tired. He did have a bad foot, and maybe he made it to that location. He's like, I'm done. I'm tapped out. And he decided to bed down. But I went and I flew the rest of the property, and I found like 1 or 2 other bucks that were kind of bedded off almost windward side. And it's just like, this makes no sense. I'm not seeing a connecting feature here. So, yeah.
So wait, what'd you
crazy.
decide?
Huh?
There is no connecting feature, or
For bedding and,
Yeah.
and coordination with
Well,
wind. No, I
or
think
in the cold even. I mean,
yeah, I think bedding locations is almost 100% dependent upon thermals. But there's also some funny situations where you have a buck and he's just bedded. Like literally just this morning, I went out and I was messing around with a solar panel on a trail camera because I have some trail cameras on the property for a research project. And I drove back through this one field. It's called Adams Field, and there's a little bit of a brushy section off to the north of it, and the road is right up against that brushy section. And I drove out to the cabin, got on the drone, flew up the drone. I was just checking because everything was so foggy this morning. I wasn't able to see hardly anything. And anyways, it was like 10 a.m. and I flew back over Adams Field in this kind of native grass, brushy. There's cedars and all sorts of nastiness. Just old clear cut is what it was. And there was a buck, mature buck, bedded 3 yards off of the road in that clear cut. And I guarantee you he was there when I drove by. And like there was no thermal advantage there. There was no anything advantage. Like he was just bedded in that location. It's like, well, why in the heck are you there? Like he's just comfortable, I think, in that situation. This is a buck that he knows his area, he knows his home range, and he knew that Polaris was just going to drive right past him in that situation. And then likewise, 50 yards away to another clear cut right on the wood edge, there was one of the biggest mature bucks on the property, and he was bedded there. And once again, I drove within 50 yards of him, and he just he's just laying there perfectly fine. But it comes down to comfort in that situation. So, flip side, if this was like a public land property and people are beating it down every single day or opening rifle, like, yeah, they're probably not going to be bedded there. They might go tuck out in a deeper location. And I'd love to research that, but I haven't yet.
Yeah.
And, at least on private land situations, a lot of times these bucks, they're hyper comfortable, and you can find them bedded within 20 yards of your cabin, and you're never going to know unless you just go tramping around. And even then, in some cases, you're not going to know. They're going to bump out, sneak out, slither away before you even know they're there.
They're known to do it.
Yeah, they're known to do it.
Man, that is so good. Did you notice anything? So thermal hubs, maybe not a ton of rhyme or reason and not some of the other locations that you found. Did you notice specific bucks had specific tendencies to bed in specific places? Like a lot of people talk about this buck always beds over here, or this buck always beds over here, and knowing that one deer. Did you find that was true? Yeah.
So the belief system that mature bucks, specifically mature bucks, are truly individuals is 100% a fact. And that plays in whenever you start looking at their bedding locations, their travel routes, and their behavior. In particular, like I'll refer back to that mainframe 10 that I'd referred to earlier. He was wild. He was crazy. He was constantly hitting rubs and scrapes. He was very aggressive to every other deer that made it even close to him. And he was constantly traveling across the property every single day. But his core bedding areas never changed. He had 3 to 4. Sometimes he would go on an adventure and he would utilize a 4th bedding area. But for the most part, he had 3 bedding areas that he was utilizing constantly. And why he skipped from one to the next at any point, I have no idea why. Sometimes it seemed consistent. Like every 3 days he would start to skip, and then he would stay in one for a week and a half. And it's like, okay, well, you're really homey there. And then he'd move around and skip again, and then he'd stay in this one for a week. And it's like, oh, I'm not connecting any dots still again. But I've definitely seen that. And then you oftentimes coming into the later season, you'll see mature bucks start shrinking their home ranges down, whereas this one didn't. He stayed crazy the whole time. But you can have a mature buck that just has a natural small home range, and he's very comfortable in this one thermal hub location. He has a food source over here. He has a water source over here. He has some does around him, but he's really not chasing because he doesn't care too much for whatever reason anymore. And he just lives in this 80-acre section and never leaves it.
Yeah.
Whereas this other one lives in a 1,500-acre section.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's very individualistic on that, which makes everying that much more complicated whenever you're trying to piece together what's taking place.
Yeah, you're trying to apply patterns to individuals, and it's hard to do. It makes you realize, like, when you're hunting a big piece, like one of the properties that we hunt is a multiple 100 acres, and it's big, and it's like you could have a deer that you have never seen on the property that never leaves, and you would never know unless you saw him or you happen to have a camera in his area.
Yeah, I mean, this property, it's right around 1,000 acres, and there's 16 cameras on it, and a lot of them, they're positioned pretty close to food sources because they happen to be moving to food plots right now pretty heavily. A little secret for everybody out there. Acorns are drying up. But we'll move past that. There are like 6 or 7 mature bucks that have never appeared on trail camera at that property.
But you found them on the drone.
Mature bucks. And they're within that. They two of them actually are on. If you were to draw like a 1,200 acre square around the property versus just 1,000, they're just right on the fringes of it, but they're going to cruise that property pretty consistently.
Yeah.
And no, I mean, no one has a clue that those deer exist.
Yeah.
And it's like, sorry.
And that's some of the
That's
magic of the whitetail
crazy.
woods,
Yeah,
right
exactly.
there.
Yeah.
You can have a buck
So
walk by
cool.
that you and nobody else knew existed.
Yeah.
Well, and I think oftentimes whenever somebody ends up killing that buck, like say you get into peak rut, rifle season hits, and then you kill one of these bucks you'd never seen before. It's like, well, he was a cruiser. Like he came in from a neighboring property,
Yeah.
et cetera, whatever. And it's like, well, he may have been on you.
He
for the
might have
last,
been there the
Yeah,
whole
3
time.
months. You don't know. Yeah.
Gosh, that's cool.
Talk to me about nocturnal bucks and maybe some of the common myths of, around October, November deer hunting, and what most people have said forever that deer do or don't do, and then what some of the research is showing to be either true or not true. Like, what's it backing?
Yeah, I mean, the October lull is like one of my favorite subjects because really the interesting thing about it is it kind of, the October lull and the belief system behind it, it merges with nocturnal bucks. And then another thing that starts taking place a lot in this time frame are cold fronts that all happen. And this is also on the tail end of all these genetic things that have been taking place with mature bucks where, they're velvet's shedding and testosterone's rising, and they all went through a microbial gut shift at the beginning of October where they were shifting off of summer browse and they're moving into acorns, et cetera, harder masts. And there's just a lot of stuff happening. And for a long time, people have kind of walked into the situation where you start getting, everyone's heard, I even heard in Bass Pro the other day where somebody was like, hey, you got any daylight pictures of that buck? Considering like everyone's worried about daylight pictures. You got any daylight pictures of him? Is he daylight active now? It's like, yeah, he's daylight active. He's always daylight active. I wish I could just scream that to everybody. It's like, there is not a nocturnal buck in the woods. I've never seen it. GPS color studies have never seen it. And I think that if one exists, I mean, I won't never say never because one might exist somewhere, but I mean, it is super rare. Every buck that I've ever seen, they're always daylight active. So then it kind of spurs back to the October lull. And it's like, well, as a hunter, somebody who's hunted October, I mean, I've seen some of these things where like you go out and you hunt and it's like sometimes things just kind of feel dead on that day. And I hadn't been able to draw a conclusion. And it's like, well, maybe the October lull is real. So started flying the drone and really hyper-focusing this time frame. And the connection that I started drawing with the lull mentality and nocturnal bucks kind of gets shoved off to the side though a little bit in my opinion because it's not a thing even on hot days, but is temperature. Everything seems to be driven by temperature in this time frame. And what I've been noticing is on days that are like 70 degrees or hotter, as these deer have started to put on their winter coats, they're very, very inactive, very sedentary throughout the whole day. And one of the first days that I started really paying attention to this, I noticed that, and it was just like, wow, these deer, they didn't move until the last 30 minutes of light, and they hardly moved that morning. It was like 68 degrees, and it's like, there might be something behind October lull. And there's a cold front coming in for the next morning. It was going to drop temps to 52 degrees, or 48 degrees in the morning, or 47, I remember. But woke up early in the morning, got out, and every single deer was up on their feet. Every single buck, young, old, mature, didn't matter. They were all chasing does like crazy. It was just hectic all day long. And then into the evening, every deer in the area, they kind of started settling down a little bit and moving out to food plots. But every mature buck daylighted in an open field. They were daylighting outside of the timber. They were all moving into open fields, which was pretty rare in comparison to last year. But last year we had a ridiculous acorn crop. So it kind of made it to where they could stay back into the woods a lot more. Whereas this year, not as impressive acorn production. So they're going to be moving out. If you have a food plot, they're going to be moving out to them pretty quick. But that was the main connection point that I was noticing was just cold fronts and their connection with. It's not really the cold. That's the thing, though. That's like the mythology of cold fronts is that like heading into November, a lot of people are going to be entering with the mentality of like waiting for that good cold front day. Like that's going to be the day that I take off work and I'm going to go hunt. And I don't. And this is why I think GPS color studies and myself have never made a connection with cold fronts. If you Google it, anything related to cold fronts, every study ever has said there's no connection with deer movement. And it's because everyone's focusing on the full movement spectrum of things. So like moving into November, you're looking at all day long, and the temperatures that are taking place in November, they're never too hot for a white-tailed deer to not move in them. They're always capable of moving all day long. But if you shift it back into that October timeframe, October lull area, there are temperatures where they literally cannot move. And
because they put on their winter coat.
They put on their winter coat. And what's happening is they make the same move in the evening and they make the same move in the morning. It just, that gets shifted around dependent upon the temperature. So if it's 90 degrees until 5:30 p.m., they're not moving until after 5:30 p.m. that day. But if a cold front moves in the middle of the day and it moves in at 2 p.m., every deer might get on their feet at 2:30 p.m. all of a sudden, just because the temperature dropped. Now they're able to get up and move. So, but in the end, even if it was 90 degrees all day long, or even if that cold front moved in the middle of the day, they're making the same distance. The net displacement, the total yards traveled, everything is the same. What's shifting is the time frame that they're capable of moving in, if that makes sense. So
that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, sorry, I'm drawing things on the table here.
No, it's
but
good.
I have to articulate things to be able to understand them myself.
Well, and you have bedding and all the stuff they want to do in between the morning and the evening spots.
Yeah.
And they're either going to do it late in the day or way early in the day if it's going to be hot all day. Or they're going to do it when you have a great chance of seeing them right in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
When it's cold or colder.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me.
So you've proved that actually there is something to cold fronts, whereas history would have said there's no correlation based on the data.
And I've gone back and I've really, parsed through all my research from last season as I've been wrestling with this October lull kind of belief system. And once you get into the time frame where all the temperatures are staying sub 60 degrees, sub 55 degrees, then there's no connection because they can just move whenever they want to.
Yeah.
The temperature allows for them to be able to do that. But whenever you shift it back into that October time frame, specifically October, where those high temps are happening, and then you're met with these, and that's another thing for our areas, especially if you look at I forget the correct term for it, but like a temperature grade map, it'll show you the max temperature differences on average, for that month. October has the biggest temperature swings.
Yeah.
And we all know that just from going out in the woods as well. But what's happening there's a couple things that's happening, and I can't remember the terminology for it right now. It'll be in my video for sure though. But thermal gradient, something about gradient, I don't remember. But basically though, there's a high uptick in cold fronts that take place, and then there's a high difference between whenever that sun goes down, then those temps just, for whatever reason, October, they drop a lot harder. And I have the science behind that in my video. I blanked on it right now.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Well, that video has not come out yet, right?
Has not come out yet as we're recording this.
Yeah,
I don't know whenever it'll come out. But
yeah. So y'all go watch that one because it's not come out yet as of now. With the cold front. So first of all, wow. Actually putting something to cold fronts and having a different conclusion than what a lot of science or all of science and research has done in the past. That's pretty impressive. With the cold front, did you notice any difference between usually, more times than not, a cold front is it's wind coming in from the north. But I know that you can have temperature swings where it's not necessarily a north wind. Did you notice any difference in movement from a north wind versus a cold front coming in from a different direction?
Not really, no. Really the most important fact of it is the temperature difference and what allows them to be on their feet or not be on their feet.
Okay.
The other day I even recorded whenever it was a little bit cooler, and you may question a high wind day, maybe they don't move whenever wind gets over 15 miles per hour. There's always kind of been the belief system that there's a perfect wind speed.
Yeah.
Whereas, too slow is kind of, don't really like that as much, but, too fast, you start getting an area where maybe they don't like it. And there might be something to too slow. But too fast, I see them move all the time and too fast.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Fascinating stuff. One last question before we're going to jump over into the ethics of technology and using drones. And I know you've got some strong opinions on this. So that will be a fun one. But I was just going to ask, for guys and girls who hunt in the Ozarks, I know there was one of the videos you did, you showed there are some days where the hunter just doesn't win. You said this a couple times, and I love that because it's just you can go back and you can look at the track and you can look at the trail of what the wind was doing, where you might set up, and you go back retrospectively and be like, how would you have hunted this? I don't know how you could have done it and not gotten busted. Knowing that and knowing that that can happen on any given day, what would you say to people about hunting in the Ozarks? How much of the time can you actually kill the deer versus you're just not going to get them? You got no shot because they're a mature, wily old whitetail that you're not going to get a chance at.
It's a hard number to pin down, but the best thing you can do if you have the time availability for it, because there's kind of two sides of the spectrum. If you're a weekend warrior and you're barely able to get out and you have to make something happen at that moment in time. Your hunting strategy is going to be vastly different than another guy where he has 30 days in the season to make something happen. But if you're that guy that has at least a little bit more kind of time on your hands, then I would highly recommend going and finding locations where, for me particularly, off of what I've seen and then also just past experience, I'm actually not a bad hunter, but I'm not going to gloat on myself too much. I do say I'm the best bow hunter in the Midwest as a joke in my first video. Some people took that really personally, by the way. I'm not the best. Yeah, I promise I'm not the best in the Midwest, but I don't know, maybe I am. But is finding. I love where there's kind of habitat diversity mixed in with the high side of a drainage. If you can find these really steep drainage systems, especially if they're littered with deadfall and all sorts of nasty stuff, oftentimes deer will wrap the high sides of those drainages near habitat transitions. And if you can, the more the merrier. I mean, if there's multiple saddles in that area and all these different things, all the things that we already know, kind of happening, and there's food availability, water availability, kind of decent doe population happening there. Just going and sitting at the high side of the drainage and having your scent blow in the direction of the drainage, whether you have thermals rising or falling in that situation, then shoving your scent in a location, and you can utilize water for this advantage, if you have a river, etc. But finding ways to shove your scent in areas where deer literally will not travel it. And you're hunting a location that's a high travel area. And if you can do that multiple times, you're going to start having success pretty quickly, especially in these, from what I've seen specifically, these high sides of drainage is oftentimes met with a saddle. You'll have a drainage on the other side coming up, and you're going to have a saddle in that location. And if you can sit on the high sides of those drainages and have everything blown down into them, you're undetectable the entire time, and you're hunting at a location a mature buck is being forced to travel. Not only does he want to utilize the saddle for thermal advantage and the ease of route, but he's also utilizing it because he has to in some cases. And if you can find those ones where he has to, it's like they're really, really good.
You're saying high side, but not facing uphill still. Like you're
Or are you sitting on the
close
ridge?
to the drainage?
Yeah, I would be sitting at the top side of the drainage.
Right.
Yeah, at
So
the very
there's a
high
big
side.
gully behind you. You're sitting right at the top of that thing, and you're looking.
Yeah, I'm all the
uphill.
way at the highest point, right up at the saddle. That's where I'm at.
Okay.
And you're looking down then.
Yeah, I'm looking. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
I'm looking down.
Yeah.
Got
Yeah.
it. That's
Yeah.
what I was trying to clarify.
Yeah, sorry.
Because there's some of those drainages in these Ozark hills where, I mean, it's going to be a drainage, then there's still more mountain.
Yes.
And if at the top of that mountain there's a saddle, you're getting up there.
Well, that kind of depends. I mean, you can get in some situations where if you have a drainage that goes up and you have multiple that split off, and then you have the mountain at the top, but that at the top of that first drainage, it's impassable, and it creates a sort of bench kind of place right in between there a little bit. Obviously, it's going to be beaten down by the top drainages coming down through it, but it's traversable for a deer to come through there. It's going to be a pretty awesome spot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it just kind of play your hand there. But where my terrain is, oftentimes the top of the drainage is going to be the top of the drainage. We don't have like true mountainous terrain. Our elevation swings aren't that crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you do, finding that location, if there's a passable section through that drainage, then they're going to be utilizing it, and what you can just reapply that same knowledge to those situations as well.
Yeah, that's great.
Amazing. You've cracked the code.
I've cracked the code.
You've done it.
Everyone will kill a mature buck this
The
year.
whitetail research is done.
All you got to do is watch your video, and it's like a guarantee, right? You're personally guaranteeing your videos to success, right? To all the hunters who watch.
100% satisfaction.
And if you do have success, go subscribe on my Patreon, please.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Man, Derrick, thank you so much. This is so much fun, and I'm so glad that we've been able to make this work. And I'm so glad that you're an Ozarker.
Yeah.
That
Same.
we hunt the same terrain.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for joining. How do people find you on YouTube?
Yeah, just whitetail research across the board. You can plug me into Google now. I actually am the first one that pops up. So
pop up.
I've officially made it.
You've done it.
That means I have made it.
Yeah, man, you got the SEO in your
taken
favor.
over. So yeah, but I've got YouTube, Patreon, Instagram. I haven't started posting to the Instagram too frequently yet, just because of time, and I kind of hate social media. But I will get there. I'll start posting cool things on Instagram at some point.
Cool.
But right now, everything is primarily on YouTube and
Cool.
Patreon.
Man, I love it.
Cool stuff coming.
Y'all stick around for, thanks for listening, first off, and then stick around for next week, because we're going to dive into the ethics around drone scouting and fair chase and all of that kind of stuff, which will be really fun. Hopefully it's a pretty new conversation because it's pretty new tech. So we'll get to dive into that, and send this podcast to a buddy who would enjoy watching, deer on thermal and enjoy listening to it just as good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll catch you on the next one.
See y'all next week.